Right, scientists, this is Mrs. Crumback again, and this week we're going to talk about rocks. There are so many things concerning rocks and how to categorize them, how to identify them, and scientists have a lot of information. With an adult's permission, you can look some of it up online. Today we're going to talk about the 3 types of rocks that you might find as you go out on your exploration during your phenomenal lab this week. When you're starting your experience, you're going to pick 3 different rocks, but I have a couple of different examples of each kind. Metamorphic rocks are one type of rock. They are formed with minerals in rocks that are changed underground when they undergo heat and pressure. So these are a couple examples of metamorphic rocks. The next type we're going to talk about are igneous rocks. Now, when liquid rock is inside a volcano, it's called magma. When the volcano erupts, it then becomes lava. And when this lava cools, you get a rock that's called igneous. The particles of the igneous rock find each other while they're cooling. If the magma cools very quickly, then the particles don't have very much time to find each other, and you get something that looks more like this. But if it cools slowly, more like on a mountain or inland, this would be more of an ocean type cooling, you get particles that are closer together because the molecules can find each other with that cooling period taking longer. The third type of rock that we're going to talk about are sedimentary rocks. And these tend to be sort of gritty most of the time, and they are rocks that are formed out of clay bits or shells, maybe some sea creatures, and through weathering, they become more likely sand or ground quartz. So sometimes if you rub 2 sedimentary rock together, you can even see some of the particles falling to the ground. Now I'm also going to show you some examples of a fun type of rock called fossils. And these are different types that have some type of living organism that either lived around it or got trapped in there. So you can see here some of the evidence or remains where there may have been different types of living organisms that were either trapped or embedded on the rock. One of the types of fossils you may be familiar with are Petoskey stones, and I purposely left part of this like it looked before it was washed, but when you have water that you put on it, you can see the remnants or the evidence that coral lived in this region. Sometimes people make jewelry out of Petoskey stones, and it's also our state stone. So I just wanted to show you an example of something that someone made for me out of a Petoskey stone. Another really fun type of fossil are called geodes. And geodes are formed when either gas bubbles or living organisms are trapped. This is a type of geode that when the glaciers were coming down from our northern region of our world, they came through this region, actually south of us, and the sediments covered clams and oysters. You can kind of see the shape of an oyster or a clam. And as the glaciers moved south toward the equator, the ice in the glaciers melted and dropped sediments very suddenly, even in layers, and they trapped the living organisms that were in the bottom of the ocean. Now, when you crack a geode open, you can sometimes see crystals on the inside and even the cavities that when the living organism turned into these crystals, the cavity sometimes is not filled in all the way. There are also different types of geodes, and this actually came from the amethyst mine that is in Arizona. And when this was cracked open, when this rock, you can kind of see the different layers as I turn it over. This has lavender crystals inside instead of the white crystals, and it brings up a good point because depending on the region of the world where the geodes were found and formed, they tell a story of what happened during the time that the glaciers or the chemical bubbles were actually forming. Some other places that we see rocks are places like the Grand Canyon. And you can see the different types of rock embedded in these beautiful areas. Something that you might not consider when you see mountains is that they're actually, many of them are made solely rock with living organisms, mainly plants, trees, animals that live in the mountains. But the main part of most mountains is made of rock. There's a really fun rock in the Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina. It's called sliding rock. And because of weathering and time with liquid washing over it, it has become smooth enough where people actually go and slide down this rock. Here are some other examples. And then we also have 3 national parks in the state of Michigan. One is called Pictured Rock National Lakeshore, and you can see that these are beautiful rock formations, and they're in a place in the Upper Peninsula called Munising, Michigan. It's where my sister's family actually lives. This is a picture of people going into the Four Peaks Amethyst Mine, which is a giant rock. This is the door that they go in. And as you can see, you can actually mine a gem called amethyst from the inside of that mine. So as you go out on your exploration with someone who loves you, that's old enough to supervise you, you will be able to choose some rocks and make a rock garden. You'll find more about this experiment and activity in the slides. I hope you enjoy it, and just remember, you rock.